Well, hey there, welcome back to Wasting Time in the Woods. My family and I took a little vacation this summer. Alex is going into the 4th grade, which is the year of the national parks, so we decided to drive our GX from Phoenix all the way up to Yellowstone and make stops at as many of the national parks along the way there and back as we could. We stopped at Zion, Bryce, Grand Teton, Yellowstone Arches, and Canyonlands. Nearly 2 weeks in the car, we didn't murder each other once. No murders. 0 murders happened. In this video, we'll cover the first leg with stops at Navajo Bridge and Lee's Ferry in northern Arizona. We'll brave the Disneyland-style lines at Zion and take a dip into the Zion Narrows. Then we'll check out the geology and kitsch at Bryce Canyon. And if you stick around to the end, maybe we'll be able to talk this guy off his ledge. To get from Phoenix to Utah, you've got to cross the Colorado River, and there's really only 2 places that you can do that east of the Grand Canyon. There's Glen Canyon Dam or Navajo Bridge. We took the more scenic route over Navajo Bridge, which sits right at the base of the Vermilion Cliffs. Northern Arizona and southern Utah is just one set of cliffs after another. This area is part of the Colorado Plateau, which is where the Pacific Plate is crashing into the North American Plate, creating the Rocky Mountains and crinkling up all the cliffs that define the Southwest geography. Navajo Bridge was built between 1927 and 1929, and a second span was built in the 1980s. One poor guy fell to his death during the construction of the original bridge. Only the newer side carries traffic these days, so you can stroll across the original bridge and be thankful that you're not a Depression-era iron worker. The bridge is a great place to check out North America's biggest and ugliest bird, the California condor. These things are monsters. They've got a 10-foot wingspan and a face that only a mother condor could love. There's a National Parks Visitors Center there where you can learn all about the Vermilion Cliffs and get your passport stamped. We got Alex her own passport this year so that she could start collecting stamps on her own. Just down the street from the Bridge Visitors Center is the turnoff to Lee's Ferry, where you can drive right down to the Colorado's banks. There's a family-friendly beach with a sandbar that lets you walk right out into the river. The water is crystal clear, emerald green, and cold here, since it's not too far from where it comes out of Glen Canyon Dam. Lee's Ferry is named after John Doyle Lee, who started a ferry service there in the late 1800s before the government caught up with him and executed him by firing squad. He was the adopted son of Brigham Young and one of the leaders of a Mormon militia that carried out a pretty despicable massacre there in 1857. The militia killed 120 pioneers as they tried to cross through Utah on their way to California. Lee ran off and started the ferry service here as a way to hide from the law, but 20 years later they caught up with him, his 56 children, and 19 wives. The marshals took Lee back to the site of the massacre and served him the same fate that he had given the pioneers 2 decades earlier. I'm guessing the condors ratted him out. Lee and the ferry are long gone, but his name remains, and this little bend in the river still makes a great spot to cool off or lay low from the law. A few more miles up 89A are the Cliff Dwellers' houses, which aren't really cliff dwellings or houses. They also weren't built by the Native Americans. They were built by a couple named Bill and Blanche Russell who came here during the 20s and decided to make a home out of the boulders. Nothing like a worldwide depression to make sleeping under a rock seem like a good option. This place was really cool to explore, but we had to get on to Utah so that we could get some rest and get an early start at Zion. Alright, well, we are at the Zion Visitors Center and it is about 7:30 a.m. So we obviously did not get the jump on the crowd. And it's a Monday. This parking lot is about 3/4 full already. So we're gonna come here, especially on a weekend in the summertime, come early. We headed into the Visitor Center to get some advice on which trails we should take.
You can take the Emerald Pools Trail. There's no waterfall right now. Oh, darn.
And then we went out to face the reality that we'd be standing in line for the shuttle bus for the next 6.5 hours. Wow. About 45 minutes in. We're only like 10 people away.
My name is Ron. I'll be your host all the way up to the Temple of Sinaloa.
You can't drive into Zion Canyon, so the shuttle is really the only way that you can get around. We took it all the way to the last stop so that we could start at the Narrows hike. The Narrows are where Zion Canyon is cut deep and narrow by the Virgin River. The first mile is a beautiful stroll along the river. There's a paved trail for most of it, or you can walk along the river to get a little closer to nature, or for it to get a little closer to you in our case. They're brave little suckers. I remember one time when I was in the Grand Canyon and a squirrel broke into one of my buddy's backpacks, chewed through the side of it. These guys look like they're just every bit as brave and as brazen. At the end of the paved river walk, you come to some steps where the trail stops, and the only way to continue upstream is through the river. It's a bit crowded in here, especially at all the water crossings. We're like, I don't know, 30 yards in, and there's still 3,000 people. So, yeah, I don't think we're gonna get very far though without walking sticks or water shoes or being over 3.5 feet tall. I'm just kidding, she's 4 feet tall. We didn't make it very far upstream, but just going a couple hundred yards, you can see how amazing this place is. After the hike, we headed back to Zion Lodge for a break where we chilled out with beer and ice cream. There's a huge lawn out front of the lodge that makes a great place to picnic and cool off after a hike. For our last hike in Zion, we took the bus back to the Grotto stop, which is where both the Angel's Landing and Emerald Pools trails start.
That looks kind of fun, but everybody's crowded. Oh, I see Angel's Landing, people climbing.
Yeah, we're not gonna do anything with the chains and such.
I don't think so.
The hike up to Emerald Pools is pretty kid-friendly, but there are some exposure to ledges. Jill doesn't like to be near anything steeper than an escalator, especially with Alex around, so Alex and I tackled this one on our own. This hike was pretty cool. There's a little waterfall along the way that we used to cool off. As the trail gets closer to the pools, you're gonna hike through some huge boulders that lean over and shade the trail. We went to the middle pools, which have a ton of tadpoles and another little waterfall.
This one's about ready to be a frog.
After we were done with our Emerald Pools hike, it was getting kind of late in the day and we had to head over to Bryce Canyon that night, so we made our last stop at the Zion Human History Museum. This place had the best video that I have ever seen at a National Parks Visitors Center. Well, all right, guys. We had one day in Zion National Park and I think we made the most of it. After Zion, we headed over to Bryce Canyon, which is about a 2.5-hour drive east. We stayed just outside the park at Ruby's Inn in Bryce Canyon City, which is essentially a family-owned town. It has the inn, a few other hotels, and a kit shop, all owned and operated by the same family for the last 120 years.
You clearly haven't got the message! This is my town!
No, it's Ruby's town, Ruby Surratt, or his great-grandkids or whatever. They've owned and operated the town and everything around it since Ruby moved here and bought up the land around 1900. They might own the town and everything in it, but in their defense, the waitress told me that they're really nice. Of course, her hand was shaking and she never made eye contact with me. Ruby's Inn is actually really cool. It's built in the style of an Old West hunting lodge, and there's a cavernous lobby and great room, or maybe I should say carnivorous. That's a load-bearing elk. There's a huge store with everything you could possibly need, tons of groceries, outdoor supplies, more taxidermy, about 5,000 square feet of kitsch, and 150 square feet devoted to Christmas. In June, we restocked, got a good night's sleep, and headed into the park in the morning. Our first stop was the Visitor Center, which had a fantastic museum with modern exhibits covering the geology and some impressive models of the hoodoos that the canyon's known for. It's got some really great displays that show how the geology of the Colorado Plateau uplifted and weathered to form the cliffs and the scenery that we were about to check out. The most impressive geology is right at the start of the park at Sunset and Sunrise Points, but those areas get really crowded and we were kind of over crowds after Zion, so we decided to head all the way down to Rainbow Point, which is at the far end of the park. There's a trail there called Bristlecone Loop, and it's a great trail for kids. It's pretty flat and winds along the canyon rim. At the farthest point, there's a lookout where you can see the Grand Staircase, which descends all the way over the Vermilion Cliffs and down to the Grand Canyon. While we contemplated the eons, Alex and I shared a giant cookie. The loop is named for the bristlecone pines that you can find along the trail. These things can live up to 5,000 years, and they're some of the oldest living things on Earth. Now, if you don't feel like hiking, you can see most of the park just by driving it. The main park road is 18 miles long and has a ton of overlooks. As we made our way back, we stopped at several like Ponderosa Canyon, Black Birch Canyon, Natural Bridge, it's got a really cool natural arch, and a ton of really excited nature groupies. It was about this time that I made one of the classic dad blunders.
You fell victim to one of the classic blunders!
As we made our way back around lunchtime, we passed the Whiteman Connecting Trail. And yes, that's really what it's called. Now, about 175 years ago, I backpacked the entire Under the Rim Trail, which runs from Rainbow Point all the way back to Bryce Point in the Hoodoos. It's about 25 miles and there's really limited water, so you have to cache water halfway, and we did that using the Whiteman Connecting Trail. Now, in my memory, this was just a jaunt through a beautiful forest that takes you to an epic vista, where I dropped off some water and then returned a day or two later backpacking to take this epic picture. Now, I seem to have forgotten that this was a fairly steep descent through a burnt-out forest with no shade and no water. What a perfect place to take a wife who's deathly afraid of heights and a road-weary 9-year-old for a picnic at 1 p.m. on a 93-degree day in June. As we made our way down, I started spotting mountain lion scat. Now, I knew it was mountain lion scat because dog poop doesn't generally have hair or class rings in it. I dragged him all the way down there so that we could have a sandwich. Then I reminisced about climbing this butte with my buddy Charles. And then I realized how hot it was, and that I'd be carrying a 65-pound sack of giggles on my back all the way to the car. Dads, don't get nostalgic. Just do a day hike in the Hoodoos and skip to the part where you get ice cream and hit the pool. On our way back, we stopped where you should probably start, in the Hoodoos at the north end of the park near the Visitors Center. The views from Inspiration Point definitely live up to the name. The Hoodoos are these rock and sand towers that stand at attention like an army of terracotta soldiers stretching off into the horizon. Bryce has this perfect blend of hard stone and soft sediment that have weathered into a sea of spires that fill the canyon and stretch off into the horizon. If you visit in wintertime like Jill and I did a few years ago, the snow makes it even more magical. After a long day of hiking, we sauntered back into Bryce Canyon City for some kitsch. And I gotta tell you, nobody does kitsch like Bryce Canyon City. Right across from Ruby's is Old Bryce Town. It's the sort of faux Old West town where you can still get a novelty headshot of Ma and Pa, stock up on a few dozen pounds of geodes, share a scoop of ice cream as you marvel at a casually racist effigy. It's the kind of thing you only see on a wooden boardwalk in a period inaccurate reconstruction, an Old West town that only ever existed in a Clint Eastwood movie. I love Bryce Canyon City. After we had dinner, we cooled off in the pool, headed over to Sunset Point, and took one last look at the canyon. Well, I think we missed sunset. You really need to be here quite a bit before sunset to get the best vantage point for at Sunset Point. But it looks amazing still. We've had a very long day at Bryce Canyon. On to the next one. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. These idiots didn't fall off the edge. To be young and dumb again. Now, if you like this little recap of the first leg of our epic National Park summer vacation, be sure to subscribe and you can follow along with us on the next leg of our journey as we head up to Grand Tetons and Yellowstone National Park, where we got stuck in a bear jam, found some baby bison bones in a hot tub, and had to share a parking space with this guy. I think that's a cow that has a drinking problem. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.